Thousands of years before the pyramids rose from the desert sands, before the first stones of Stonehenge were laid, there was a place where human civilization began, not with a whisper, but with a roar. Picture this, the fertile land between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, where a people known as the Sumerians built the world's first cities, invented writing, and laid the foundation for everything that would follow. They weren't just pioneers, they were visionaries whose secrets have been buried in the sands of time until now. What if I told you that much of what we think we know about ancient history is wrong? That the Sumerians left behind clues so astonishing they could rewrite the story of humanity itself? This isn't just a journey into the past, it's a descent into a mystery that has puzzled scholars for centuries. The Sumerians didn't just create civilization, they embedded it with riddles, technologies, and knowledge that seem impossible for their time. From their advanced understanding of the stars to their eerie depictions of beings not of this world, their legacy is a puzzle waiting to be solved. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on 25 of their most mind-bending secrets revelations that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Imagine standing in the ruins of Ur or Uruk, where the walls still whisper the echoes of a lost world. These weren't just cities, they were the birthplaces of ideas that shaped our modern lives. Yet beneath the surface of their achievements lies something darker, something unexplained. Why did their texts describe gods descending from the sky? How did they calculate planetary movements with such precision millennia before telescopes existed? And what or who were they really worshipping? The answers are more shocking than you can imagine. So settle in, because by the time we're done, you'll see history, and perhaps even our place in the universe, in a whole new light. The Sumerians didn't just keep track of sheep and grain, they invented writing itself, and what they carved into clay would change the world forever. Picture a simple receipt for barley, etched into wet clay with a reed stylus around 5,000 years ago. That mundane act was the birth of Cuneiform, humanity's first writing system. But here's the astonishing part. Within just a few centuries, those same wedge-shaped symbols evolved from recording taxes to capturing the deepest thoughts of the human mind. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving work of literature, wasn't scribbled by some advanced later civilization. It was penned in cuneiform over 4,000 years ago, a story of kings, gods, and the quest for immortality that still resonates today. Yet the real shock isn't just that they wrote poetry. Buried in those tablets are mathematical concepts that shouldn't have existed for millennia. Take the Plimpton 322 tablet, a Babylonian-era artifact rooted in Sumerian knowledge. It's essentially a trigonometry table, accurately calculating right triangles using Pythagorean triples over 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. How, we still don't fully understand. Some scholars argue this wasn't just math for building temples. It hints at a sophisticated grasp of geometry, possibly linked to astronomy or even land surveying. But here's the twist: cuneiform wasn't some elite, guarded secret. Tens of thousands of tablets have been found, from shopping lists to court rulings, proving literacy was surprisingly widespread. Imagine a society where merchants, poets, and bureaucrats all shared this revolutionary tool. That's like jumping from cave paintings to Shakespeare in less than 500 years. And while Egypt's hieroglyphs and China's oracle bones came later, neither exploded into daily use as rapidly or as democratically. The Sumerians didn't just write, they unleashed the power of collective memory, setting the stage for everything from laws to philosophy. The most haunting question isn't how they did it, but why. What urgent need drove them to invent writing so abruptly? Was it trade, as textbooks suggest, or something deeper, like recording the whispers of their so-called gods? Because when you read their text, you notice something eerie. The scribes often wrote as if transcribing divine instruction. Maybe cuneiform wasn't just a human innovation. Maybe it was a gift or a warning carved in clay for us to uncover millennia later. Now let's talk numbers, because the Sumerians didn't just count sheep or measure grain. They reshaped time itself. Picture this: you glance at your clock and there it is, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. Ever wonder why? That's not a random choice. That's the Sumerian base 60 number system echoing across 5,000 years of history. Unlike our familiar base 10 system, their math revolved around the number 60, a stroke of genius that made calculations far more versatile. Why 60? It's divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30, making fractions and measurements cleaner than any other base. But this wasn't just about counting hours. The Sumerians used this system to track the heavens with jaw-dropping precision. Their astronomical tablets reveal they could predict lunar eclipses, chart the movements of Venus, and even calculate the length of a year within minutes of our modern measurements. How clay tablets like the Enuma Anu in Lil contain data so accurate? Scholars once assumed they must be medieval forgeries, yet these calculations were etched millennia before telescopes or even the concept of zero existed in the Western world. Then there's the matter of quadratic equations, yes, the same ones that baffle high school students today. The Sumerians weren't just solving for x, they were applying these equations to real-world problems like land division and construction. A tablet from around 2000 BC shows a step-by-step solution to a quadratic problem involving the area of a field, centuries before Babylonians formalized the method. It's as if they skipped entire chapters in the development of mathematics, leaping straight to concepts that should have taken civilizations another 2,000 years to grasp. Here's the real mystery: where did this knowledge come from? The Sumerians themselves claimed it was given to them by the Anunnaki, the so-called gods who descended from the sky. Modern scholars dismiss this as mythology, but the numbers don't lie. Their math was too advanced, too sudden, with no evidence of gradual development. Either we've lost a critical chapter in human history, or someone or something handed them the keys to the universe far earlier than we're willing to admit. Either way, every time you check the clock, you're glimpsing a secret that's been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. If you think modern medicine began with Hippocrates or Galen, think again. The Sumerians were diagnosing diseases and prescribing treatments with startling accuracy 2,000 years before the Greeks even dreamt of the Hippocratic Oath. Among the thousands of clay tablets uncovered in ancient Mesopotamia, some of the most revealing are their medical texts, detailed manuals that read like something from a modern doctor's desk. Headaches, infections, even psychological disorders, they didn't just list symptoms. They provided step-by-step treatments using herbs, minerals, and rituals that blur the line between science and the supernatural. Take one tablet from the city of Nippur, dating back to around 2100 BC. It describes a wound treatment involving crushed willow leaves, a plant we now know contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. But here's where it gets eerie. Another prescription mentions applying a poultice made from fermented grain, a substance later identified as a primitive form of penicillin mold. That's right, Sumerian physicians may have been harnessing antibiotics nearly 4,000 years before Alexander Fleming's accidental discovery. Was this trial and error, or did they possess knowledge we've only recently rediscovered? Their diagnostic methods were just as advanced. One text outlines a condition called the hand of a ghost, describing symptoms we'd now recognize as epilepsy or nerve disorders. Treatments ranged from herbal infusions to incantations, suggesting they saw illness as both physical and spiritual. But don't dismiss the incantations as mere superstition. Modern studies show the placebo effect is real, and if a patient believed a chant could heal, maybe it did. The Sumerians weren't just mixing herbs, they were pioneering the mind-body connection. Perhaps the most unsettling revelation comes from their surgical texts. They detail procedures for draining abscesses, setting broken bones, even tooth extractions, all with tools made of bronze and flint. Imagine the courage it took to undergo surgery in an era without anesthesia, sterilized instruments, or germ theory. Yet their survival rates inferred from skeletal remains suggest they knew more about hygiene than we'd expect. Some tablets even warn against using rusty blades, hinting at an early understanding of infection. But the biggest question lingers: how? How did a civilization that still worshipped storm gods grasp concepts like antiseptics and antibiotics? Mainstream historians credit trial and error, but the precision in these texts feels too deliberate. Some researchers point to the Anunnaki again, those mysterious gods who supposedly gave the Sumerians writing, math, and now medicine. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe buried in these clay tablets lies proof that ancient knowledge wasn't just lost, it was deliberately suppressed. Either way, every time you pop an aspirin, you're tasting a secret that's been waiting in the dust for millennia. The Sumerians didn't just build cities, they engineered them with a precision that would make modern urban planners gasp. Step into the streets of Ur, their crown jewel, and you'd find yourself walking through a meticulously designed grid of baked brick roads, lined with homes, shops, and temples arranged in orderly blocks. This wasn't haphazard growth, it was urban planning on a scale unmatched for millennia. Every street was laid out at right angles, forming a perfect north-south, east-west orientation that maximized airflow and sunlight. And here's the kicker: they did this over 4,000 years ago, long before the Romans or Greeks dreamed of such organized cityscapes. But the real marvel wasn't just the layout, it was what lay beneath. The Sumerians built the world's first known sewage system, a network of clay pipes and drains that funneled wastewater away from homes and into the rivers. In some neighborhoods, toilets flushed into these underground channels, a luxury even medieval Europeans wouldn't have for another 3,000 years. Archaeologists have found traces of bitumen, a natural tar, coating the inside of these pipes to prevent leaks, proving they understood the importance of sanitation long before germ theory existed. Imagine the shock of Victorian explorers uncovering these systems, realizing their own cities paled in comparison to a civilization that thrived before the pyramids. Then there's the matter of zoning. Sumerian cities weren't free for all. They were carefully divided into residential, commercial, and sacred districts. The ziggurat of Ur, a towering stepped temple, sat at the city's heart, surrounded by administrative buildings and elite housing. Further out, artisans and merchants occupied workshops and marketplaces, while farmers lived near the fields. This wasn't just practical, it reflected a deep societal order, a blueprint for how humans should live together. Even their building codes were advanced. Homes were constructed with standardized baked bricks, fired in kilns to endure floods and time. Some walls still stand today, their bricks stamped with royal seals to guarantee quality. What's truly baffling is the speed of their innovation. Cities like Uruk and Eridu sprang from nothing to metropolis status in mere centuries, as if someone handed them a master plan. No trial and error, no gradual evolution, just sudden, flawless execution. Scholars still debate how they achieved such sophistication so quickly. Some point to the Anunnaki again, those enigmatic figures Sumerian texts describe as bringing knowledge from the heavens. Others argue it was the pressure of growing populations and scarce resources that forced innovation. But either way, walking through Ur's ruins, you can't shake the eerie feeling that you're seeing the work of minds far ahead of their time, or perhaps not of their time at all. And let's not forget the baked bricks, their secret weapon. While most ancient cultures built with sun-dried mud bricks that crumbled over time, the Sumerians fired theirs in kilns, creating materials so durable they survived millennia of floods and wars. The process required vast amounts of fuel and labor, a testament to their organizational might. Even more impressive, they mixed straw and reeds into the clay to reinforce the bricks, an early form of fiber-reinforced construction we still use today. It's as if they cracked the code of urban resilience 4,000 years early, leaving behind cities that whisper their genius in every surviving wall and sewer line. So next time you stroll through a modern grid-laid city, past storm drains and zoning signs, remember, you're walking in the footsteps of the Sumerians. Their blueprints never faded, they just waited for the world to catch up. When we think of assembly lines, we picture Henry Ford's factories or maybe even the workshops of Industrial Revolution Europe. But the truth is far older and far more surprising. The Sumerians didn't just invent the potter's wheel, they used it to create the world's first mass production system over 5,000 years ago. Picture a workshop in ancient Ur where rows of artisans spun clay into identical bowls, jars, and cups at a pace that would have made Ford nod in approval. This wasn't just craft, it was industry on a scale the world had never seen. The key to their efficiency, standardization. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands of Sumerian pottery fragments, and here's what's astonishing. Measurements across cities like Uruk, Lagash, and Nippur match down to the millimeter. Jars meant for grain held exactly the same volume, whether you were in a marketplace or a temple storeroom. Bowls followed strict sizing guidelines, some even stamped with official seals to certify their capacity. This level of uniformity suggests something radical: centralized oversight, a system where potters worked from shared templates enforced by scribes and inspectors. Imagine the bureaucratic genius required to maintain such consistency across an entire civilization without modern tools. But the real breakthrough was the wheel itself. Before the Sumerians, pottery was painstakingly shaped by hand, each piece unique and time-consuming. The wheel changed everything. By spinning clay at a constant speed, artisans could produce symmetrical vessels in minutes instead of hours. And they didn't stop there. Excavations reveal workshops with multiple wheels operating side by side, each worker specializing in a single step: shaping, smoothing, or firing. This division of labor mirrors the efficiency of later factories, proving the Sumerians grasped the principles of mass production millennia before the term existed. The evidence is etched into the clay itself. At the site of Tel al-Ubaid, archaeologists found stacks of nearly identical beakers, all fired at the same temperature and finished with the same reddish glaze. Chemical analysis shows the clay came from the same quarries, mixed to a precise consistency. This wasn't just skilled craftsmanship, it was a supply chain with materials sourced, processed, and distributed on an industrial scale. Even the kilns were engineered for volume, some large enough to fire hundreds of pots simultaneously, a far cry from the small household ovens of earlier cultures. Why did they need so much pottery? The answer lies in their booming economy. Sumer was a land of surplus where grain, oil, and beer were traded in staggering quantities. Standardized containers meant fair exchanges, accurate taxes, and efficient storage. A merchant in Ur could trust that a selah measure in Lhasa held the same amount of barley, eliminating haggling and fraud. This wasn't just about convenience, it was the foundation of a complex economy, one that relied on trust and precision to function. And here's the twist: some of their standardized measures survive today. The modern bushel traces its roots to Sumerian units passed down through Babylon and Rome. Their gur vessel, used for grain, held roughly 300 liters, a volume so practical it endured for centuries. Even their system of dividing units into 60ths echoes in our measurements of time and angles. The Sumerians didn't just make pots, they encoded their logic into the very fabric of civilization. But the most haunting question isn't how they achieved this, it's why no one else came close for thousands of years. While other cultures developed pottery, none matched the Sumerians' ruthless efficiency or bureaucratic control. Was it sheer necessity, driven by their dense urban populations, or did they, as their texts suggest, learn these techniques from a higher power? Whatever the answer, every time you drink from a factory-made mug or glance at a measuring cup, you're holding a relic of a system perfected in the dust of ancient Mesopotamia. The concept of school might feel like a modern invention, but the Sumerians were drilling multiplication tables and grammar lessons into young minds over 4,000 years ago. Hidden within the ruins of their cities, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary: the world's first classrooms, known as adaba, or tablet houses. These weren't just casual tutoring sessions. They were rigorous academies where students as young as 6 spent years mastering cuneiform, mathematics, and literature under the watchful eye of stern instructors. And yes, they even complained about homework, proof that some things never change. Step inside one of these adaba, and you'd find rows of students hunched over clay tablets, reed styly in hand, painstakingly etching wedge after wedge. The curriculum was brutal, memorizing hundreds of cuneiform signs, copying proverbs and royal decrees, and solving math problems that would make a modern middle schooler sweat. Discipline was harsh. Teachers wielded canes, and one surviving text actually lists the beatings a student received for poor penmanship, talking in class, or even standing up without permission. Yet despite the rigid structure, these schools weren't just for elites. Merchant sons, temple scribes, and even some girls attended, suggesting the Sumerians understood the value of education far earlier than most civilizations. Now here's where it gets relatable. Among the thousands of tablets dug up in places like Nippur and one stands out: a whiny, frustrated lament from a student named Ludingara. In it, he moans about his teacher assigning too much work, complains about being beaten for minor mistakes, and even grumbles that his parents are siding with the instructor. Sound familiar? This 4,000-year-old tantrum could have been written yesterday, proving that the struggle between students and authority is as old as civilization itself. But the real shock isn't the complaint, it's the fact that Ludingara's tablet was preserved. Some scholars believe it was a writing exercise, a way to teach empathy or humor. Others think it might have been submitted as part of an assignment, making it the oldest surviving piece of homework in history. What's truly mind-blowing, though, is the sophistication of their teaching methods. Students didn't just copy texts, they debated them, analyzed proverbs, and even composed original poetry. Advanced pupils studied bilingual dictionaries, translating between Sumerian and Akkadian, while math students tackled geometry problems that wouldn't reappear in schools for millennia. And the textbooks, imagine clay tablets filled with everything from agricultural manuals to epic poetry, all meticulously organized by difficulty. The adaba wasn't just a school, it was a knowledge factory, churning out generations of scribes who'd run temples, courts, and trade networks with precision. But here's the haunting question: why did they build such an advanced system so early? Most ancient cultures taught skills through apprenticeships or oral traditions. The Sumerians, though, needed something more: a way to standardize writing, math, and law across their sprawling cities. Maybe that's why their schools feel so modern. They weren't just teaching kids, they were engineering a society. And when you read Ludingara's complaint, you're not just hearing a kid gripe, you're hearing the birth pangs of an idea that would shape the world: education as the great equalizer. So the next time a student groans about too much homework, remember they're part of a tradition that's older than the pyramids. The Sumerians didn't just drink beer, they worshipped it, brewed it with sacred precision, and even used it as currency. Imagine a world where your paycheck wasn't cash or gold, but frothy, golden liquid. That's exactly how Sumerian laborers were compensated, with daily beer rations carefully measured out according to their rank and toil. Archaeologists have uncovered tablets from the city of Umma detailing these payments. Brickmakers received 2 liters a day, while supervisors earned 5. This wasn't just a perk, it was a calibrated system, the earliest known form of minimum wage, and the beer wasn't some crude, sour concoction. Sumerian brewers mastered techniques so advanced, their recipes still baffle modern craft brewers today. At the heart of their brewing tradition stood Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, whose name literally meant the lady who fills the mouth. The hymn to Ninkasi, etched into clay around 3,800 years ago, is more than just a religious poem. It's the world's oldest surviving beer recipe. Line by line, it describes a process strikingly similar to modern brewing. Malted barley soaked in water, fermented with honey and dates, then strained through reed mats. But here's the twist: the hymn was sung while brewing, turning each batch into a sacred ritual. Some scholars believe the rhythmic chanting may have served a practical purpose, helping workers time each step without clocks or timers. What's truly astonishing is the scale of their operation. Excavations at the city of Eridu revealed massive brewery complexes with vats capable of holding hundreds of liters. Chemical residue on ancient pottery confirms they didn't just make one type of beer, they produced light ales, dark stouts, and even spiced varieties infused with herbs like coriander and mint. One tablet from Lagash mentions a special royal brew reserved for elites, aged in cedarwood barrels for extra flavor. This wasn't just subsistence brewing, it was a sophisticated industry with quality control overseen by temple priests who ensured each batch met strict standards. But why beer? In a land where water sources were often contaminated, fermented beverages were safer to drink. The alcohol killed bacteria, and the nutrients in barley made it a calorie-rich staple. Workers building ziggurats or digging canals needed those calories, and beer provided energy while lifting spirits literally. Tablets from depict laborers cheerfully hauling bricks under the sun, their wages clinking in clay jars beside them. It's a scene that feels oddly modern, a reminder that even 4,000 years ago, people understood the value of a well-earned drink. The most haunting mystery isn't how they brewed it, but why their knowledge vanished for millennia. Sumerian beer was clearer, stronger, and more varied than the muddy brews of medieval Europe. Some researchers speculate that invading cultures like the Babylonians lost or simplified the techniques. Others wonder if the sacred recipes were kept secret, passed down only in temple hymns until they were forgotten. Either way, every sip of craft beer today carries echoes of Ninkasi's hymn, a divine gift from the world's first master brewers. So next time you raise a glass, remember, you're tasting history itself, a legacy as old as civilization. Think women in the ancient world were powerless. The Sumerians would laugh at that idea. Far from being sidelined, Sumerian women held positions of staggering influence, running businesses, composing poetry, and even ruling as queens. Among the dusty shelves of cuneiform tablets, archaeologists have uncovered contracts signed by female merchants, legal cases argued by women in court, and hymns penned by priestesses who doubled as literary geniuses. This wasn't some progressive anomaly, it was baked into their society from the start. Take the case of Queen Puabi, whose tomb in the royal cemetery of stunned the world when it was unearthed in the 1920s. Forget a modest burial, Puabi was laid to rest in a dazzling display of power. Her headdress alone, made of gold leaves, lapis lazuli, and carnelian, weighed nearly 5 pounds. She wore a cloak of beads so finely crafted, restringing it took modern experts weeks. But the real shock wasn't the treasure, it was the message. Buried with her retinue of attendants and musicians, Puabi wasn't just a queen, she was a divine figure, a leader whose authority mirrored the goddesses she served. Then there were the Nadatu women, a class of priestesses who doubled as economic powerhouses. These weren't cloistered nuns, they owned vast estates, managed fleets of trade ships, and lent silver at interest. Cuneiform tablets from the city of Sippar reveal one Nadatu known as Amat Shamash, who ran a lucrative textile business while overseeing temple affairs. She negotiated contracts, sued defaulters, and even adopted daughters to pass on her legacy, rights unimaginable for women in later Mesopotamian cultures. The Sumerians didn't just tolerate female entrepreneurs, they celebrated them. But the most subversive discovery, female scribes. In a world where writing was power, women like Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon the Great, weren't just literate, they were literary pioneers. Enheduanna's hymns to the goddess Inanna are the first signed poems in history, blending politics and devotion with fiery eloquence. Other tablets mention women teaching scribble schools, proving education wasn't a male monopoly. Even average women could buy property, initiate divorces, and testify in court rights that would vanish in later Babylonian and Assyrian law. Why did Sumerian women wield such influence? Some scholars point to their religion, where goddesses like Inanna ruled war and love with equal ferocity. Others argue it was practical. With men often away at war or trade, women kept society running. But perhaps the answer lies deeper. In a civilization that revered balance, where heaven and earth were intertwined, maybe restricting half the population seemed as absurd as building a ziggurat with one hand. Whatever the reason, their legacy whispers a provocative truth. Equality isn't modern, it's ancient, and we're just rediscovering it. Long before Hammurabi carved his famous code into stone, the Sumerians were already writing laws that would shape justice for millennia. Their legal system wasn't just advanced, it was shockingly modern in its complexity and fairness. Picture this, a courtroom in the city of Ur around 2100 BCE, where disputes were settled not by the whims of a king, but by written laws etched into clay tablets. These weren't vague proclamations, they were precise statutes covering everything from property rights to marital disputes, with penalties as detailed as any modern legal code. Take the case of builders, for instance. One Sumerian law decreed that if a house collapsed and killed the owner, the builder would be put to death. If it killed the owner's son, the builder's son would be executed instead. Harsh, absolutely, but here's what's fascinating. This wasn't blind vengeance. The law recognized negligence, holding professionals accountable for their work in a way that wouldn't become standard again until the Industrial Revolution. Even more striking, other clauses required builders to use specific materials and techniques, proving the Sumerians understood the link between regulation and public safety. Then there's the matter of contracts. The Sumerians didn't just shake hands on deals, they drafted binding agreements with clauses that wouldn't feel out of place in a modern courtroom. Marriage contracts listed dowries and inheritance rights. Business partnerships outlined profit splits and liability terms. One tablet from Lagash even records a rental agreement for a donkey, specifying the daily fee and penalties for overworking the animal. This obsession with written contracts wasn't bureaucratic red tape. It was the backbone of a society built on trust and accountability, but the real genius lay in their courts. Unlike later civilizations where kings acted as judges, Sumerian cases were heard by panels of elders and professional judges who followed established precedents. Transcripts of trials survive, revealing cross-examinations, witness testimony, and even the use of sworn oaths on the names of gods. In one case from Nippur, a woman accused of stealing a loaf of bread was acquitted after witnesses confirmed her alibi, a startling example of due process in action 4,000 years ago. What's most surprising, though, is how progressive some of their laws were. Women could initiate divorce and claim child support. Debtors unable to pay were given work programs instead of life imprisonment. Even slavery wasn't always permanent. Tablets show enslaved people buying their freedom through installment plans. These weren't the draconian punishments we associate with ancient justice. They were nuanced, pragmatic solutions designed to maintain social order without crushing the vulnerable. Yet for all their fairness, Sumerian law had its quirks. One statute mandated that if a man divorced his wife without cause, he had to pay her 60 shekels of silver. But if she ever said to him, "You are not my husband," she'd be thrown into the river. Another law punished false accusers with the exact penalty their victim would have faced, a brutal but poetic form of justice. These contradictions reveal a society wrestling with the same tensions we face today between mercy and deterrence, between tradition and progress. So why don't we talk about Sumerian law the way we do Hammurabi's code? Maybe because their system wasn't carved into a monumental stone stele for the ages. It lived in the humbler medium of clay tablets scattered across city-states, evolving with each generation. But in those unassuming fragments lies a revelation. The rule of law wasn't invented by Babylonians or Romans. It was born in the crowded streets of and Uruk, where ordinary people demanded fairness, and wrote it down for the world to remember. Rising from the Mesopotamian plains, the ziggurats of Sumer weren't just temples, they were cosmic gateways, engineered with precision that defies their ancient origins. These towering stepped pyramids, like the Great Ziggurat of weren't randomly placed. Archaeoastronomers have discovered something startling. Their corners align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions north, south, east, and west, with a margin of error less than half a degree. To achieve this without compasses or modern tools would require knowledge of the stars so advanced, it rewrites what we thought possible for their era. But why go to such lengths? The answer might lie in the heavens themselves. One theory points to the ziggurats as ancient observatories. The Sumerians meticulously tracked celestial events, and the staircases of these structures may have served as ritual pathways mirroring the journey of the gods, or as sightlines for astronomers. At the ziggurat of Nana in the main staircase faces the point where the moon rises during the lunar standstill, a rare event marking the moon's northernmost position in the sky. Coincidence unlikely. Clay tablets describe priest astronomers called Intu who scaled these stairways to record planetary movements, suggesting the ziggurats doubled as sacred telescopes. Then there's the enigma of their construction. The ziggurats weren't solid mounds, they contained hidden chambers and hollow cores, some with ventilation shafts angled to catch specific celestial light during solstices. At the ziggurat of Borsippa, a shaft aligns with the sunrise on the summer solstice, flooding the inner sanctum with light for just minutes each year. Was this theatrical symbolism, or did it serve a practical function? Some researchers argue these alignments encoded astronomical data, acting as stone calendars to predict eclipses and equinoxes. Others go further, proposing the ziggurats were stargates, ritual sites where the Sumerians believed they could communicate with the Anunnaki, those mysterious beings they claimed descended from the stars. The most tantalizing clue comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero climbs a ziggurat-like structure to reach the heavens. Sumerian texts repeatedly link these towers to the concept of Doranki, the bond between heaven and earth. Modern scholars dismiss this as myth, but the precision of their alignments begs the question: did the Sumerians build these monuments to reach something or someone? The ziggurats' cores often contained unusual materials, sheets of rare metals, crystalline stones, even layers of bitumen mixed with sand, a substance known to block electromagnetic waves. Were they trying to create some kind of resonance or energy focus? Perhaps the most unsettling detail is the ziggurats' abrupt abandonment. By the Babylonian era, these structures were still used, but their original astronomical functions seem forgotten. It's as if the knowledge behind their design vanished with the Sumerians themselves. Today, their ruins whisper a riddle. Were these the world's first scientific instruments disguised as temples? Or did they serve a purpose so profound we've yet to decipher it? Either way, every stone in these ancient towers seems to hold a secret, one that still points silently to the stars. The haunting melodies of Sumerian musicians didn't fade into silence, they were etched in clay, waiting to be rediscovered. Among the thousands of tablets unearthed in Mesopotamia, one stands apart, a small, unassuming fragment from the city of Nippur dating back to around 2000 BC. At first glance, it looks like just another administrative record, but look closer and you'll see something extraordinary: neatly arranged cuneiform signs above carefully drawn strings, the world's oldest surviving musical notation. This wasn't random scribbling, it was a precise tuning manual for a lyre, complete with intervals and string names. Modern musicians who have decoded it describe a scale eerily similar to the modern diatonic system, the same foundation Western music uses today. How did a civilization without even a concept for harmony devise a system so sophisticated? The answer might lie in the royal tombs of Ur, where archaeologists made a discovery that still echoes through history. In the 1920s, Leonard Woolley's team uncovered not just gold and jewels, but something far rarer: intact musical instruments. Among them were the great lyre of Ur and its smaller counterpart, the silver lyre. These weren't crude noisemakers, they were masterpieces of engineering and art. The great lyre's soundbox was a bull's head cast in gold, its beard of lapis lazuli, its eyes of shell and bitumen. But the real marvel was its construction. With 11 strings, a number that allows complex harmonic possibilities, and a tonal range spanning over 2 octaves, this instrument could produce melodies as rich as any modern harp. The silver lyre, equally intricate, had strings tuned to a pentatonic scale, a system still used in traditional music from China to Appalachia. What's truly baffling is how they achieved such precision without modern tools. Analysis of the lyres reveals an advanced understanding of acoustics. The sound boxes were hollowed from resonant woods, their dimensions calculated to amplify specific frequencies. The strings, likely made from sheep gut, were tensioned with wooden pegs that allowed micro-adjustments, a feature absent from later Greek and Roman instruments. Even the bull's head wasn't just decoration. Its hollow structure acted as a sound chamber, dispersing notes evenly. This wasn't guesswork, it was physics applied with startling intentionality. Then there's the matter of performance. Depictions on cylinder seals show lyres played alongside drums, pipes, and even early forms of the oboe. Temple hymns describe rituals where musicians performed in pairs, suggesting harmonies or call and response patterns. One tablet from Ur mentions a chief musician who led ensembles of up to 20 players, a Bronze Age orchestra, but the most poignant clue comes from the tombs themselves. The great lyre was found beside the skeleton of a woman, her hands placed where the strings would have been. Was she a musician buried with her instrument to play for the gods? The thought sends shivers down the spine, an artist silenced for millennia, yet still reaching across time. Why does this matter? Because music for the Sumerians wasn't entertainment. It was sacred mathematics, a bridge between earth and heaven. Their hymns weren't just songs, they were encoded prayers with specific notes believed to invoke deities. The tuning tablet from Nippur even includes instructions for adjusting intervals to match celestial cycles, hinting at a belief that harmony on Earth mirrored harmony in the cosmos. Modern experiments have confirmed something startling when played as directed. These ancient scales produce a resonance that seems to vibrate at the same frequency as human brainwaves associated with meditative states. Coincidence, or did the Sumerians discover something about sound and consciousness that we're only beginning to grasp? So the next time you hear a chord progression or hum a tune, remember, you're tapping into a tradition that began not in medieval Europe or ancient Greece, but in the shadow of ziggurats, where golden lyres first gave voice to humanity's oldest questions. And somewhere, buried beneath the sands, more tablets may still wait, each one a potential key to melodies lost for thousands of years. The Sumerians didn't just track time, they mastered it with a lunar calendar so precise it still influences how we mark our days today. Picture this: every evening, temple astronomers in Ur or Uruk climbed their ziggurat steps, their eyes fixed on the night sky. Their mission: to spot the first sliver of the new moon, the signal that another month had begun. This was no casual observation, it was a sacred science, one that divided the year into 12 lunar months, each 29 or 30 days long. But here's where their genius shines. They knew this system fell short of the solar year by about 11 days. Left unchecked, their festivals would drift through the seasons, planting times would miss their windows, and chaos would reign. So they devised a solution so elegant, it's still used in some religious calendars today, the intercalary month. When the gap between lunar and solar cycles grew too wide, the king's astronomers would decree an extra month, slipping it into the calendar like a hidden cog in a cosmic clock. Tablets from Nippur reveal how these adjustments were calculated not by guesswork, but by meticulous record-keeping spanning generations. One text lists lunar eclipses dating back centuries, proving they recognized patterns modern science would later call the Saros cycle. Another tablet from Lhasa outlines a 19-year cycle with 7 intercalary months, a system so accurate it kept their calendar in sync with the seasons to within hours per century. That's a level of precision medieval Europe wouldn't match for thousands of years. What's truly astonishing is how they applied this knowledge. Farmers didn't just plant when the river flooded, they consulted almanacs predicting optimal dates based on celestial cycles. The Farmer's Almanac of Ninurta, a tablet from around 1500 BC, instructs when to sow barley when the Pleiades rise and when to harvest before the dog star appears. This wasn't folklore, it was agricultural science tying earthly cycles to the stars with razor-sharp accuracy. Even their festival dates were adjusted dynamically. A tablet from Umma records a royal decree delaying the New Year celebration by a month because the barley was not yet ripe. But the real mystery lies in how they achieved such accuracy without telescopes or clocks. Some scholars point to their ziggurats, whose staircases may have served as giant calendrical markers, with shadows tracking solstices and equinoxes. Others believe they used water clocks, ceramic vessels that dripped at a constant rate to measure nighttime hours when the stars were visible. The most tantalizing clue comes from a tablet describing a device called a ribbon of heaven, possibly an early astrolabe used to map celestial movements. Whatever their methods, the results speak for themselves. A civilization that could predict eclipses, align cities to cardinal directions, and balance lunar and solar time, all while calling it sacred duty. Perhaps the most haunting legacy of their calendar lies in its endurance. The Jewish calendar still uses intercalary months, much like the Sumerians did. Our 7-day week that traces back to their 7 planetary deities. Even the frantic adjustments of modern leap years echo the wisdom of priests who 4,000 years ago understood a profound truth. Time isn't just something we measure. It's something we create, and in the silent precision of their clay tablets, the Sumerians left us a gift, not just a way to count days, but a way to touch eternity. The Sumerians didn't just treat broken bones, they diagnosed broken minds with methods that blur the line between medicine and magic. Among the thousands of clay tablets recovered from ancient Mesopotamia, some of the most chilling describe psychiatric practices that rival modern therapy in their complexity. Take the case of dream interpretation, a science so revered, kings employed court specialists called mashmashu to decode nightly visions. These weren't vague fortune tellers, they worked from detailed manuals classifying dreams by symbols and emotions. One tablet from Nineveh, copied from an even older Sumerian text, lists over 100 dream scenarios and their meanings. Dream of flying, a sign of impending escape from trouble. Dream of teeth falling out, a warning of betrayal. What's striking isn't just their specificity, it's the psychological insight. The mashmashu understood dreams as reflections of waking anxieties, a concept Freud wouldn't formalize for another 4,000 years. But dreams were just the beginning. The Sumerians recognized mental illnesses as distinct conditions, cataloging symptoms with startling accuracy. A tablet from the city of Lhasa describes a patient suffering unceasing fear of crowds and visions of unseen tormentors, an unmistakable portrait of what we'd now call panic disorder or schizophrenia. Treatments ranged from herbal sedatives like poppy and mandrake to more unsettling remedies. One prescription instructs a healer to mold a clay figurine of the patient, chant incantations to transfer the illness into the doll, then smash it in a river. To modern eyes, this seems like pure superstition, but consider the ritual's psychological power. The act of externalizing pain into an object, then destroying it, mirrors cognitive behavioral therapy techniques used today. Then there were the exorcisms. Sumerian texts describe ashipu, or sorcerer physicians, who performed elaborate rituals to expel afflicting winds, their term for invisible forces causing madness. A tablet from Uruk details a ceremony where the ashipu bound the patient's wrists with red and white wool, symbolizing the struggle between chaos and order, while chanting verses to summon protective spirits. They burned aromatic woods like cedar and myrrh, substances now known to have mild psychoactive effects, possibly inducing trance states that facilitated healing. The most haunting accounts come from royal archives, where scribes documented cases like Princess Cubottom, who raved about voices from the walls until an ashipu isolated her in a pitch-dark room for 7 days, an early form of sensory deprivation therapy. What's most unsettling is how these practices evolved. Later Babylonian and Assyrian texts borrowed Sumerian methods but stripped away their nuance, reducing mental illness to mere demonic possession. The Sumerians, by contrast, saw the mind as a landscape where biology and spirituality intertwined. Their treatments combined empirical observation, like noting which herbs calmed seizures, with symbolic acts that addressed the soul. Even their terminology reveals sophistication. The word gig, often translated as sin, could also mean mental burden, suggesting they understood guilt and trauma as illnesses in their own right. So where did this knowledge come from? Some tablets hint at trial and error, like a healer's note admitting, "The black drink failed, but the yellow paste brought peace." Others, though, speak of secrets revealed by the god Enki, who supposedly taught humanity the arts of healing in a mythical time before the flood. Whether divine gift or human innovation, their legacy lingers in the most unexpected places. The next time you hear someone say, "Get it off your chest," remember, you're echoing a Sumerian belief that emotional pain could be physically expelled, a notion as old as civilization itself. And in that, perhaps, lies their greatest insight. The mind, like clay, retains every impression, no matter how deeply buried. Stretching from the Persian Gulf to the shores of the Indus River, the Sumerian trade network wasn't just vast, it was a logistical masterpiece, connecting cultures separated by thousands of miles and languages. Merchants from Ur and Lagash didn't just barter with neighbors. They sailed to distant ports like Dilmun, modern Bahrain, and Meluha, the Indus Valley, carrying lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, and carnelian from the far reaches of India. What's astonishing isn't just the distance they covered, it's how they managed it without maps or alphabets. Their secret, a system of trust and verification so ingenious, it still influences global commerce today. At the heart of this system lay the humble clay envelope, a device as revolutionary as the modern contract. Picture a merchant in the bustling docks of Ur, preparing a shipment of wool to Mohenjo-Daro. Instead of scribbling a note, he'd inscribe the terms of the deal, quantities, prices, delivery dates onto a clay tablet. Then, to prevent tampering, he'd encase it in a second layer of clay, sealing it with his personal cylinder roll and the recipient's mark. Only when the goods arrived would the outer shell be broken, revealing the intact agreement inside. These weren't just primitive receipts, they were legally binding documents with penalties for fraud etched into their very surface. The real genius, though, was in the details. Some envelopes contained tiny clay tokens, pebbles, or beads representing specific quantities of goods, so even an illiterate dockworker could verify a shipment by matching the tokens to the cargo. Others featured notched edges, aligning with cuts on the inner tablet to prove they hadn't been pried open. Archaeologists have found these envelopes from the ruins of Harappa in Pakistan to the palaces of Syria. each one a silent witness to a network of trust stretching across continents. But how did they navigate such treacherous routes? Tablets from the city of Mari reveal another shocker. Sumerian merchants used standardized weights and measures recognized from the Indus to the Mediterranean. A shekel of silver in held the same value as one in distant Anatolia, eliminating haggling over exchange rates. They even had insurance systems. Caravans pooled resources to compensate traders for losses from bandits or storms, a concept that wouldn't resurface until the Renaissance. Perhaps the most haunting clue to their sophistication lies in something seemingly mundane: shipping manifests. One tablet from Lagash lists a cargo of copper, timber, and ivory, alongside a cryptic note about the black stones that burn. Recent analysis suggests these were lumps of bitumen, used to waterproof ships, but the description matches later accounts of coal. Did Sumerian traders stumble upon a fuel source millennia ahead of its time? The answer may still lie buried in the silt of forgotten ports. What's clear is this: in a world without GPS or wire transfers, the Sumerians built a global economy not with force but with clay and ingenuity. Every time you sign a contract or track a package online, you're walking a path they paved 5,000 years ago, one sealed envelope at a time. While most ancient armies fought on foot with crude stone weapons, the Sumerians revolutionized warfare with innovations that would dominate battlefields for thousands of years. Their secret weapon, the war chariot, not the sleek, horse-drawn vehicles of later empires, but a terrifying prototype made of solid wood and pulled by onagers, a type of wild ass. Picture these early chariots rumbling across the plains of Mesopotamia around 2500 BCE, their wheels reinforced with leather and copper, their drivers wielding bronze-tipped javelins. What they lacked in speed compared to later designs, they made up for in sheer psychological impact. Imagine being an enemy foot soldier seeing these rumbling monsters charge for the first time in history. No wonder Sumerian carvings depict enemies scattering in terror. But the chariot was only part of their lethal arsenal. Sumerian smiths mastered bronze alloys centuries before their neighbors, crafting weapons that turned battles into slaughters. Their signature sickle swords, known as kopish, could hook shields and slash through leather armor with brutal efficiency. Spears with socketed bronze heads, a design so advanced it wouldn't become widespread for another 1,000 years, allowed troops to stab with precision while keeping enemies at bay. Archaeologists have even uncovered helmets from the royal cemetery of hammered from a single sheet of copper and lined with leather, proving they understood the value of protecting their soldiers long before the Greeks or Egyptians. The real game-changer, though, was their tactics. A broken tablet from the city of Lagash describes something astonishing: the first recorded phalanx formation. Unlike the disorganized mobs of rival city-states, Sumerian infantry fought in tight, shield-locked rows, their spears projecting like a wall of bronze. This wasn't just brute force, it was mathematical precision. The tablet lists unit sizes in multiples of 60, mirroring their base 60 number system, suggesting they planned battles like equations. Later carvings show these formations advancing under the cover of large rectangular shields, a tactic the Greeks would later claim as their own innovation. What's truly chilling is how quickly these technologies spread. Within centuries, chariots and bronze weapons appeared from the Indus Valley to the Nile, as if the Sumerians had unleashed a blueprint for modern warfare. Some scholars argue this wasn't coincidence. Their trade networks likely carried both goods and military know-how. Others point to darker possibilities. Clay tablets from Mari describe mercenaries hired out by Sumerian kings, turning their innovations into exportable violence. Yet the greatest mystery isn't how they fought, but why they stopped. By the time of Babylon's rise, Sumerian chariots had vanished, their phalanxes forgotten. Was it resource scarcity, conquest, or did their own inventions outpace them, leaving a civilization that dreamed of immortality defenseless against the very tools it created? Either way, every tank that rolls across a modern battlefield, every infantry square that holds its line, owes a silent debt to those first terrifying moments when the Sumerians taught the world the art of war. Stretching across the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, the Sumerians didn't just farm, they engineered an agricultural revolution so profound, it turned barren land into the Fertile Crescent. Their secret weapon, a labyrinth of canals, dikes, and reservoirs so precisely designed, modern engineers still marvel at their efficiency. Picture a network of waterways branching like veins from the Tigris and Euphrates, feeding fields that sprawled for miles. But this wasn't just ditch digging, it was hydraulic mastery. They calculated slopes to the fraction of a degree, ensuring water flowed evenly without eroding the soil. Some canals stretched over 50 miles, their banks reinforced with reeds and bitumen to prevent collapse, an innovation that wouldn't reappear until Roman aqueducts. The real genius lay in their control systems. Clay tablets from Lhasa detail a bureaucracy of water judges who allocated irrigation slots to farmers based on crop needs and seasonal floods. One particularly striking record documents a dispute between two villages over water rights, resolved by measuring flow rates with standardized bronze gauges. They even practiced something eerily similar to modern drip irrigation, using perforated clay pots buried near plant roots to conserve water in arid zones. This wasn't just survival, it was sustainability engineered 4,000 years before the term existed. Then there were their crops. While most ancient cultures planted the same fields until the soil died, the Sumerians rotated barley with legumes like lentils and chickpeas, a technique modern agronomists now know replenishes nitrogen naturally. A farmer's almanac from Nippur advises planting barley after floods to sweeten the earth, then switching to beans when the soil grows weary. They even left fields fallow in 7-year cycles, a practice later codified in the Bible but pioneered in Sumer. But the most shocking revelation, their yields. Cuneiform records from Ur's temples show harvest yielding 30 grains of barley for every one planted, a ratio unmatched until the 18th century agricultural revolution. How they amended soil with crushed bones for phosphorus and composted marsh reeds for potassium, creating fertilizers that wouldn't be chemically understood for millennia. Archaeologists analyzing ancient seed stores found varieties of wheat and barley selectively bred for drought resistance, proving they weren't just farmers, they were the first geneticists. What's haunting is how abruptly this knowledge vanished. Later civilizations like the Babylonians inherited Sumerian canals but lost their nuance, leading to salinity crises that turned fields white as snow. Today, satellite images reveal ghostly outlines of their irrigation grids beneath Iraq's desert's silent testament to a system that fed millions. Perhaps their greatest lesson wasn't just in growing food, but in remembering that every civilization, no matter how advanced, is just one failed harvest away from collapse. The Sumerians didn't just tell stories about the universe, they mapped it with myths so precise they border on prophetic. At the heart of their cosmology lies the Enuma Elish, a creation epic etched into clay tablets millennia before Genesis. But this isn't just a tale of gods and chaos. Hidden in its lines are uncanny parallels to modern astrophysics. Take the opening scene, a universe of swirling primordial waters where nothing exists except the mingling of fresh and saltwater deities, Apsu and Tiamat. To the ancients, this was poetry. To a modern cosmologist, it's startlingly reminiscent of the quantum foam theorized in the early moments of the Big Bang, a seething, formless void where matter and energy blur. Then comes the clash. The god Marduk slays Tiamat, splitting her body to form the heavens and earth. The vivid description of her corpse becoming the firmament mirrors the process of planetary accretion, where celestial bodies coalesce from cosmic debris. Even their depiction of the underworld as a place of no return aligns with contemporary black hole theories. Were these just lucky metaphors, or did the Sumerians glimpse truths about the cosmos that science would only rediscover millennia later? Then there's the matter of the Anunnaki, the so-called gods who descended from the heavens. Mainstream archaeology dismisses them as mythic archetypes, but their descriptions in Sumerian texts are eerily specific. Tablets from Nippur describe them as towering figures who shone like the sun, possessed advanced tools, and genetically engineered humanity to serve as laborers, a narrative that uncomfortably parallels modern genetic editing and artificial intelligence debates. One controversial tablet, known as the List of Sumerian Kings, claims these beings ruled for tens of thousands of years before the Great Flood, blending impossibly long lifespans with detailed accounts of celestial boats. Ancient astronaut theorists like Erich von Däniken argue these weren't allegories but records of extraterrestrial contact, pointing to Sumerian art depicting winged figures with elongated skulls and what appear to be mechanical wristwatches. But here's where it gets even stranger. The Sumerians placed their gods in a very real solar system. A broken tablet from Nineveh, copied from an earlier Sumerian source, describes all planets including Neptune and Uranus long before telescopes existed. Even more baffling, it depicts a mysterious 12th celestial body called Nibiru, orbiting the Sun every 3,600 years. Modern astronomers have since hypothesized the existence of Planet 9, a potential icy giant lurking at the solar system's edge. Coincidence, perhaps, but then why did the Sumerians also calculate planetary orbits with accuracy rivaling Renaissance astronomers? Their Venus tablets track its movements within minutes of NASA models, and their ziggurats align not just to stars but to planetary conjunctions that repeat only every few millennia. The most haunting question isn't whether the Sumerians knew more than they should have, it's how. Their cosmology lacks the gradual development seen in other ancient cultures. There's no trial and error, no primitive stargazing evolving into complex theories. Instead, their knowledge appears fully formed, as if handed to them complete. Some scholars suggest a lost, advanced precursor civilization like Atlantis. Others point to the Sumerians' own claims that the Anunnaki gifted them this wisdom in a time before recorded history. Whatever the truth, their legacy forces us to confront an unsettling possibility that the boundary between myth and science might be thinner than we think. And every time a new exoplanet is discovered or a quantum theory reshapes our understanding of reality, we're walking a path the Sumerians might have charted for us long ago. The Sumerians didn't just weave cloth, they industrialized it, turning wool into an economic powerhouse with a level of organization that would make modern textile corporations blush. Hidden within the dry columns of ration tablets from cities like and Umma lies a revelation. Fabric wasn't just a commodity, it was a meticulously graded, state-controlled industry. Take one tablet from the reign of Shulgi, detailing monthly wool distributions to temple workers. At first glance, it reads like a simple inventory, but look closer and you'll uncover a sophisticated classification system, with wool sorted into no fewer than 8 distinct quality grades, each with its own cuneiform symbol. The finest, marked with a sign meaning soft as a cloud, was reserved for royal garments and deity statues. Coarser grades labeled fit for sacks or hard as a goat's beard were issued to laborers and soldiers. This wasn't just practicality, it was branding millennia before logos existed with quality so consistent. A merchant in distant Dilmun could order third-grade Umman wool and know exactly what to expect. What's truly staggering is the scale of production. Temple archives from Lagash record flocks numbering in the hundreds of thousands, with precise tallies of lambs, ewes, and rams, each category assigned specific grazing lands and shearers. Ration lists reveal teams of women and children spinning thread in temple workshops, paid in barley and oil for their output. One particularly eye-popping tablet from documents a single year's textile production at over 30,000 garments, a number that would rival fast fashion factories today. But this wasn't sweatshop labor. Quality control seals found on bales of fabric show inspectors rejected substandard batches, enforcing standards that kept Sumerian wool renowned across the ancient world. The real genius, though, lay in their distribution. Unlike later civilizations where textiles circulated haphazardly, Sumerian warehouses operated like modern fulfillment centers. Tablets from Gursu outline a system where bales were tagged with their origin, grade, and even the shepherd's name, creating full supply chain traceability. Merchants trading with Elam or Anatolia didn't haggle over quality. They referenced standardized price tablets where second-grade Lhasa wool always cost 2 shekels of silver per bolt. Some contracts even included clauses for color fastness, guaranteeing dyes wouldn't fade after washing, a concern so timeless it's still in clothing warranties today. Perhaps the most haunting evidence of their sophistication comes from an unlikely source: laundry lists. Temple scribes kept meticulous records of garments sent for cleaning, noting stains, repairs, and even the type of lye used. One tablet from Nippur details a robe returned unwearable due to overly harsh scrubbing, with the washerwoman fined 5 silver rings for damages. This level of bureaucratic obsession suggests something profound. The Sumerians didn't just make textiles. They systematized them, turning fleece into a currency of power that clothed an empire. And in every stitch of fabric found clinging to millennia-old skeletons or pressed into clay seals, their legacy whispers, civilization isn't built on grand monuments alone, but on the everyday miracles of thread and loom. Buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia for over 4,500 years, the royal game of wasn't just a pastime, it was a window into the minds of the world's first gamers. When British archaeologist Leonard Woolley unearthed this ornate board in the 1920s from the Royal Cemetery of its significance wasn't immediately clear. At first glance, it resembled an elegant but indecipherable artifact, a rectangular board of 20 squares inlaid with lapis lazuli and shell, accompanied by pyramidal dice and polished stone playing pieces. But the real breakthrough came decades later when a cuneiform tablet misplaced in a museum drawer and forgotten was finally translated, revealing something extraordinary. This wasn't just a game, it was a strategy manual complete with rules, odds, and even what might be history's first recorded trash talking between players. The tablet, dating back to around 1700 BC, reads like an ancient rulebook. 2 players would race their pieces across the board's intricate path, using tetrahedral dice to determine moves. But here's where it gets fascinating. The gameplay wasn't just luck. The scribe meticulously calculated probabilities, advising players when to take risks or hold back, mirroring modern concepts like expected value in game theory. One passage even warns against reckless moves with a proverb: "The hasty Sherpu bird finds no grain. A 4,000-year-old equivalent of slow and steady wins the race." The tablet's margins contain scribbled notes, likely from long-dead players boasting of victories or lamenting unlucky rolls, proving some human experiences are truly timeless. What's truly mind-bending is how widespread this game became. Identical boards have been found from Crete to India, some bearing Sumerian markings, others adapted with local symbols. A version discovered in the ruins of Assyrian Nineveh still had the names of players scratched into its surface, frozen in mid-match when the city fell in 612 BC. The game's universality suggests it wasn't just entertainment. It was a social technology bridging cultures through shared rules, much like chess or backgammon today. Archaeologists have even found gambling debts recorded on tablets, with one particularly unlucky player in Babylon owing 15 silver shekels after a losing streak, equivalent to months of a laborer's wages. But the most haunting revelation lies in the game's spiritual dimension. Many boards were buried with their owners, and the path of squares mirrors motifs found in Sumerian afterlife texts, hinting that gameplay might have symbolized the soul's journey. The 5 rosette squares, often decorated with celestial imagery, could only be safely landed on with exact throws, suggesting a blend of skill and divine favor. This wasn't just a way to pass time, it was a ritual, a microcosm of the universe's randomness and order. Today, you can play the royal game of exactly as the Sumerians did. Museums have created replicas, and enthusiasts worldwide compete in tournaments using the ancient rules. Rolling those pyramid dice connects you to an unbroken chain of players stretching back to the dawn of cities. Every move echoes with the laughter, curses, and camaraderie of people who lived millennia ago, reminding us that across time and culture, the urge to play and to win is wired deep into what makes us human. While Roman aqueducts dominate history books, the Sumerians were engineering gravity-defying arches and waterproof canals millennia earlier. Secrets buried in plain sight beneath the Mesopotamian soil. Walk through the ruins of a Sumerian palace and you'll find something that shouldn't exist. Soaring brick archways, their wedge-shaped stones perfectly balanced to distribute weight without mortar. This wasn't just crude experimentation, it was the world's first true arch, a structural marvel Rome wouldn't replicate for another 2,000 years. The ziggurat of Djur boasts a 15-foot-wide corbelled vault, its bricks angled inward with geometric precision to create a ceiling that stood since the 14th century BC. What's baffling isn't just their skill, it's the absence of evolutionary precursors. Most architectural innovations emerge through trial and error, yet Sumerian arches appear fully formed, as if their builders skipped straight to mastery. The secret to their longevity, bitumen, the same black, tarry substance we use to pave roads today. Sumerian engineers harvested this natural petroleum seepage from pits near Hit, boiling and filtering it into a waterproof sealant that turned their canals into impervious highways. Excavations at reveal canals lined with reed mats soaked in bitumen, layered like modern asphalt to prevent erosion. Even more impressive, they mixed bitumen with sand and gravel to create early concrete, reinforcing the foundations of ziggurats and bridges. A tablet from Gursu details a recipe for eternal mortar, specifying ratios of bitumen, lime, and crushed ceramics, a formula later rediscovered by Roman engineers and credited as their innovation. What's truly revolutionary is how they applied these materials. The Nippur Canal system, stretching over 40 miles, features sluice gates with bitumen-coated wooden hinges, allowing precise water control. At the site of Tello, archaeologists found pipes made of bitumen-coated clay, their joints sealed with linen strips dipped in the same tar, a primitive version of the threaded plumbing we use today. Even their buildings were protected. Walls at Uruk show alternating layers of brick and bitumen, creating a damp-proof barrier against seasonal floods. The haunting question isn't how they achieved this, it's why their techniques vanished for centuries. Later Babylonian canals collapsed from salt buildup, and Roman arches, while grander, relied on heavier materials and thicker walls. Perhaps the answer lies in the Sumerian worldview. They didn't just build for the present, but for a future they believed would last eternity. Every arch, every tar-sealed canal was a covenant with time itself, one we're only now beginning to decipher. Sumerian stands alone, an orphan language with no known relatives, no linguistic siblings whispering shared roots across the ancient world. Unlike most tongues that branch from sprawling family trees, Indo-European, Afro-Asiatic, Sino-Tibetan, Sumerian exists in eerie isolation, its grammar and vocabulary defying all attempts to link it to another living or dead language. Imagine cracking open a clay tablet and finding a sentence structure so bizarre, it flips modern linguistics on its head. Verbs at the beginning, nouns that don't distinguish gender, and a system of prefixes and suffixes so precise, it could convey subtle nuances like whether the speaker witnessed an event firsthand or heard it secondhand. This wasn't just a language, it was a linguistic alien, birthed fully formed into history with no evolutionary trail. The mystery deepens when you consider how abruptly Sumerian appears. One moment there's silence, no precursor scripts, no crude attempts at writing. The next, an explosion of complex literature, legal codes, and poetry etched in cuneiform. Most languages evolve gradually, borrowing and morphing over centuries. Sumerian, though, feels like it arrived complete, as if its creators skipped the awkward phases of linguistic adolescence. Even more puzzling, their own myths claim this wasn't a human invention. The epic Enmakar and the Lord of Aratta describes the god Enki fashioning Sumerian as a pure tongue to unite humanity, a detail that makes linguists squirm because in a way the language does feel engineered. Its logical consistency, its lack of irregularities, these are traits rarely seen in organic languages. Enter the most controversial theory, Proto-Euphratean. A handful of scholars, like the late Igor Diakonoff, argue that Sumerian didn't emerge in a vacuum. They point to a handful of words, terms for farming tools, rivers, and cities, that don't fit Sumerian structure but appear in later Akkadian texts. These linguistic loanwords, they say, are fragments of an even older language spoken by a people who inhabited Mesopotamia before the Sumerians arrived. Picture a lost civilization, forgotten so thoroughly that only these linguistic ghosts remain, their identity erased by time. Critics dismiss this as speculation, but the evidence is tantalizing. Why would Sumerian, a language obsessed with inventing its own terms for everything, suddenly borrow words for plows or canals unless they were inherited from the land's original inhabitants? The debate takes a stranger turn when you examine place names. Cities like Eridu and don't have Sumerian etymologies. Their meanings are lost, as if the Sumerians themselves didn't name them but adopted titles from an older, vanished lexicon. Even the word Tigris isn't Sumerian. It's thought to derive from a Proto-Euphratean term meaning swift river. If true, this implies the Sumerians weren't Mesopotamia's first masters but successors to a culture so ancient even they only knew it in fragments. But here's the haunting twist. If Proto-Euphratean existed, why haven't we found a single inscription, a lone artifact confirming it? Some researchers propose a chilling answer. Perhaps its speakers never developed writing, or if they did, their records were on perishable materials lost to floods and time. Others suggest an even darker possibility, that the Sumerians, proud inventors of cuneiform, deliberately suppressed the older language, erasing it from history as they carved their own legacy into clay. What's undeniable is this: Sumerians' isolation isn't just a linguistic curiosity. It's a riddle wrapped in lost history, a silent challenge to our understanding of civilization's dawn. Every time a scholar tries to force it into a family tree, the language resists, standing defiant, a lone monument to a past we're still struggling to hear. While most ancient cultures saw the night sky as a canvas for myths, the Sumerians treated it as a mathematical puzzle, one they solved with startling precision. Their star catalogues, etched into clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, don't just name constellations, they map celestial movements with scientific rigor. Take the Venus tablet of Amasajuka, a 7th century BC copy of an even older Sumerian record. At first glance, it's a simple log of the planet's appearances and disappearances. But modern astronomers who analyzed its data were stunned. The tablet tracks Venus's 8-year cycle within minutes of NASA calculations, a feat requiring generations of meticulous observation. How did they achieve such accuracy without telescopes? The answer lies in their ziggurats, not just temples, but ancient observatories where priest astronomers spent lifetimes charting the heavens. Their eclipse predictions border on supernatural. The Enuma Anu Enlil, a series of 70 tablets, contains eclipse omens so precise, scholars once dismissed them as medieval forgeries. One passage warns of an eclipse when the moon is shadowed on the 14th day, a reference to lunar eclipses occurring exclusively at full moon. Another describes solar eclipses as the sun's disk turning black while the stars appear, noting they only happen during new moon. These aren't vague prophecies, they're empirical observations, recognizing patterns modern science calls the Saros cycle. This 18-year repetition of eclipses wasn't discovered by Babylonian or Greek astronomers. The Sumerians documented it first, their priests marking clay cylinders with eclipse dates like a cosmic calendar. What's truly baffling is their grasp of planetary motion. A shattered tablet from Nineveh, painstakingly reassembled, reveals something that shouldn't exist, a list of planetary periods. It gives Saturn's orbit as 29.5 years off by mere days, Jupiter's as 12 within weeks of accuracy, and Mars's as 47, a rounding of its actual 49-year cycle. These figures weren't guesses, they're the result of methodical record-keeping spanning centuries. One theory suggests they used water clocks to time planetary transits, while another proposes they tracked shadows on ziggurat staircases acting as giant sundials. Either way, their data was precise enough to predict celestial events decades in advance, a skill later civilizations would attribute to divine revelation. The most haunting clue to their mastery lies in a controversy still raging today. The Sumerian king list mentions rulers before the Great Flood who reigned for tens of thousands of years, a detail long dismissed as myth. But what if it's coded astronomy? Scholar Joseph Goodavage noticed these reigns match planetary orbital periods when multiplied by a sacred number. For example, the legendary King Alulam's 28,000-year rule mirrors Saturn's orbit multiplied by 960, a key Sumerian mathematical constant. Even the total years listed align with precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis. Were they embedding cosmic knowledge in king lists, knowing only initiates would understand? Modern telescopes and supercomputers have confirmed their data, but not their methods. How did a civilization without lenses or calculus map the heavens so flawlessly? Their own answer chills the spine. The Anunnaki, they claimed, were not just gods but celestial navigators who measured the heavens as a shepherd counts his flock. Whether myth or memory, one thing's certain: every time an eclipse prediction lights up your phone, you're glimpsing a secret the Sumerians carved in clay when history itself was young. The Sumerians didn't just trade goods, they invented an entire financial system so sophisticated, modern bankers would recognize its logic instantly. Hidden in the dry columns of cuneiform tablets from cities like Ur and Lhasa lies a revelation. These ancient merchants weren't just exchanging barley and silver, they were calculating compound interest, loaning capital, and even grappling with inflation millennia before the concept had a name. Picture a clay tablet from 2000 BC, its surface etched with a loan agreement for 30 shekels of silver to be repaid in 5 years, with 1/5 added each harvest. That simple phrase is the world's oldest documented interest rate, 20% annually, proving the Sumerians didn't just understand finance, they codified it into law. Their temples doubled as the first banks, with priest bankers issuing loans to merchants, farmers, and even other city-states. What's astonishing isn't just the existence of credit, but its precision. Tablets from the reign of King Rim-Sin of Lhasa reveal loans with adjustable rates, lower for productive ventures like irrigation projects, higher for riskier trades like caravan expeditions to distant Elam. Some contracts even included collateral clauses, specifying that defaulters would forfeit land, homes, or even years of labor. A particularly chilling record from Ahmad details a debtor offering his daughter as security, a stark reminder that finance has always been intertwined with human vulnerability. But the real shock comes from their grasp of macroeconomic principles. A series of tablets from Isin chronicles something unprecedented: the world's first recorded inflation crisis. After a succession of poor harvests, the price of barley skyrocketed from 1 shekel per gur, about 300 liters, to 60 shekels, a 6,000% increase. The scribes didn't just note the numbers, they analyzed causes, blaming too much silver chasing too little grain. This wasn't passive observation, it was early monetary theory in action. The palace responded by fixing prices and releasing emergency grain reserves, interventions that wouldn't become standard policy until the 20th century. What's truly baffling is their mathematical sophistication. A tablet excavated from Nippur contains a word problem that would stump many college students today. If a merchant loans 100 grams of silver at 12% interest per year, compounded monthly for 5 years, what's the total repayment? The solution, neatly worked out in cuneiform, demonstrates they'd mastered exponential growth calculations, a concept formalized in Europe only in the 17th century. They even had specialized terms for different financial instruments: the suckle short-term trade credit, the haru long-term investment loan, and the mass, a form of futures contract on commodities like wool or dates. The haunting question isn't how they developed these systems, it's why they vanished. Later Babylonian codes like Hammurabi's capped interest rates and simplified calculations, losing the nuance of Sumerian finance. Perhaps the answer lies in their own undoing. Tablets from Ur's final years show an economy choking on debt, with over half the population indentured to creditors. In their relentless pursuit of growth, the Sumerians may have invented not just banking, but the first boom and bust cycle, a warning etched in clay that even the most advanced systems can crumble under their own weight. Every time you check a stock price or fret over inflation, you're walking a path they paved 5,000 years ago, one interest calculation at a time. Among the most tantalizing mysteries of the Sumerians are the whispers of lost technologies, objects so advanced they seem to defy the timeline of human innovation. Take the case of the so-called Baghdad battery, a clay pot discovered in modern-day Iraq that could rewrite our understanding of ancient science. This unassuming artifact, dated to around 200 BC but likely rooted in much older Sumerian knowledge, consists of a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and traces of acidic residue. When reconstructed, it functions as a primitive galvanic cell capable of generating a small electric current. Mainstream archaeology dismisses it as a storage vessel, but experiments prove otherwise. Fill it with vinegar or grape juice, and it produces enough voltage to electroplate gold onto silver. Could the Sumerians have mastered basic electrochemistry millennia before Volta's famous battery in 1800? The implications are staggering. Then there are the crystal lenses, meticulously carved quartz discs found in the ruins of Nineveh and Nimrud, polished to near optical perfection. These aren't decorative baubles under magnification, their precise convex curves reveal a startling purpose. When tested, some focus sunlight enough to ignite tinder or etch cuneiform into wax, while others correct refractive errors in human vision. The most famous, the Layard lens, dates back to 700 BC but bears the hallmark of Sumerian craftsmanship. How did they achieve such precision without diamond-tipped tools? Their own texts offer a clue. A tablet from Ashur describes seeing stones used by priests to observe the distant motions of the stars. Could these have been telescopes centuries before the Dutch invented them? The controversy deepens with the discovery of gold artifacts from Ur, plated so thinly and evenly that modern experts struggle to replicate the technique without electricity. A ceremonial dagger from Queen Puabi's tomb shows a gold sheath bonded to a bronze core at a molecular level, something traditionally requiring electrolysis. Sumerian texts speak of fireless gilding rituals involving mysterious waters of the gods, possibly referencing early acid baths charged by primitive batteries. Even more provocative are the accounts of the Anunnaki melting stones with their eyes, a description eerily reminiscent of laser cutting. Yet the most haunting question isn't whether these technologies existed, it's why the knowledge vanished. Later Babylonian and Assyrian artifacts show cruder versions of these techniques, as if the original methods were forgotten or deliberately suppressed. Perhaps the answer lies in the Sumerian obsession with secrecy. Their temple workshops were guarded like fortresses, their craft techniques encoded in riddles. What we're uncovering now may be mere fragments of a scientific tradition that once rivaled our own, a legacy buried not in sand but in the guarded whispers of history. Every spark from a reconstructed Baghdad battery, every beam focused through an ancient lens, forces us to reconsider a civilization far more brilliant and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. The greatest mystery of the Sumerians isn't how they rose, it's how they vanished. By 2000 BC, the cities that had dazzled the ancient world were crumbling, their ziggurats abandoned, their canals choked with salt. For centuries, scholars blamed a single culprit, the brutal conquests of the Elamites and Amorites, but clay tablets and soil samples now reveal a far more complex tragedy, one where climate, agriculture, and human ambition conspired to erase a civilization. Start with the land itself. Core samples from the Persian Gulf tell a chilling story. Around 2200 BC, the region was hit by a 3-century drought so severe, it's been dubbed the 4.2 kiloyear event. Tree rings from Turkey to Oman confirm rainfall plummeted, while dust layers in Greenland ice cores match winds carrying Mesopotamian soil halfway across the globe. The Sumerians, dependent on predictable floods, watched their lifeblood, the Tigris and Euphrates, shrink to trickles. Tablets from Lagash beg the gods for rain, describing withered barley fields and dried-up canals. One heartbreaking letter from a merchant laments, "The river has forgotten us and the earth cracks like an old man's skin." Yet drought alone doesn't explain their collapse. The Sumerians were master engineers. They'd survived dry spells before. The fatal blow came from beneath their feet. Decades of intensive irrigation had poisoned the soil with salt, a phenomenon modern farmers still battle. Cuneiform records from detail crop yields declining from 30 to 1 to just 2 to 1 over 3 centuries. Archaeobotanists analyzing ancient grains found shocking levels of sodium chloride, while white crusts visible in satellite imagery mark fields abandoned to salinity. The Sumerians knew the danger tablets warn against overwatering, but their solutions came too late. A desperate experiment using gypsum to leach salt from fields appears in later texts, but by then, the breadbasket of Mesopotamia was becoming a wasteland. Invasion narratives, long favored by historians, now seem like symptoms rather than causes. Yes, the Elamites sacked Ur around 2000 BC, but Sumerian decline had begun centuries earlier. Recent excavations at Tel Leilan in Syria reveal something startling. Entire cities north of Sumer were abandoned overnight, their streets littered with unburied bodies. Climate models suggest these were climate refugees fleeing south into Sumer's heartland. The famous Lament for Ur describes foreigners swarming like locusts, but genetic evidence complicates the story. Bones from this period show no sudden shift in ancestry, implying the invaders might have been starving neighbors, not foreign hordes. The most provocative theory emerges from a neglected set of tablets shipping manifests from the final days of Ur. Unlike earlier records detailing grain and wool, these list tools, livestock, and even dismantled machinery. Most telling are the headings not to Akkad or to Elam, but to Dilmun, Bahrain, and to Magan, Oman. Combined with pottery styles suddenly appearing along the Arabian coast, it suggests a mass exodus. The Sumerians, it seems, didn't just die out, they sailed away. Underwater archaeology hints at submerged settlements near Bahrain, where freshwater springs could have supported refugees. If true, their greatest legacy might be the cultures they seeded across the Gulf, their knowledge carried by the very merchants who once plied Mesopotamia's rivers. In the end, the Sumerians fell victim to the same forces that built them. Their canals turned fertile plains salty. Their reliance on centralized grain stores made them vulnerable to drought, and their openness to trade became a highway for chaos. Yet their disappearance wasn't an ending, it was a dispersal. Every time a farmer checks soil salinity or a city plans for climate refugees, they're grappling with lessons the Sumerians learned too late. The first civilization didn't just vanish, it left a warning, etched not in clay this time, but in the very earth they once ruled. From the moment we began unearthing the secrets of the Sumerians, one thing became terrifyingly clear: everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization is wrong. These weren't just early farmers stumbling toward progress. They were visionaries who invented writing before Egypt's pyramids were built, calculated planetary movements without telescopes, and performed surgeries with antibiotics millennia before modern medicine. Their language appears fully formed with no ancestors. Their mathematics used a base 60 system still guiding our clocks, and their ziggurats align with celestial events we've only recently rediscovered. Even their myths describe gods descending from a mysterious 12th planet, a concept that now haunts the fringes of modern astronomy, but the most unsettling realization. Their knowledge didn't evolve, it arrived complete, as if handed to them. The precision of their medicine, the sophistication of their laws, the sudden emergence of their technology, all of it defies the slow march of human progress. We've spent centuries crediting later cultures for innovations the Sumerians mastered first, from mass production in pottery workshops to financial instruments like interest-bearing loans. Even their collapse whispers warnings we're only now deciphering, as if their fate, falling to climate change, soil salinity, and social unraveling, was a message etched not just in clay, but in the very patterns of history itself. So which secret shocked you the most? Was it the Baghdad battery hinting at ancient electricity, the standardized education system where students groaned about homework 4,000 years ago? Or the haunting possibility that their gods, the Anunnaki, might represent something far stranger than myth? The truth is, every answer rewrites our story. Because if the Sumerians could hide this much in plain sight, what else lies buried? Beyond them, older civilizations wait, vanished cultures like the Vinca of the Balkans with their undeciphered proto-writing, or the megalithic builders of Göbekli Tepe, whose temple predates Sumer by 6,000 years. The deeper we dig, the more the past feels like a puzzle missing its edges. And if history has taught us anything, it's this: the greatest secrets aren't lost. They're just waiting for the right moment to be